we are going to be talking about writing details. And if you've been writing for very long, you're probably aware that it's important to mention details in your story. Appealing to the senses and paying attention to detail is what will ground your reader and bring the story to life. Details, they make it so that your reader experiences the story instead of just reading about it. It helps them get immersed into the narrative. So as writers, it's helpful for us to mention some details like what a character is wearing, or the color of her hair, or the smell of the river, or the texture of the tent. All these things that appeal to our senses. Usually, we want to tag our characters with a particular description, and they call them character tags, if you haven't heard that before. And that way, each time that character comes on stage, if you want to say, you use those tags, and it helps the reader remember who this is. So, for example, if you read Harry Potter, you're going to know that the Minister of Magic, Fudge, he always has a bowler hat. And that Dumbledore has twinkling eyes and half-moon spectacles. J.K. Rowling mentions the same details for these characters regularly to kind of tag them. Now, in a future video, I'm going to refer to them as anchors, but just know that they're tags, or I might refer to them as anchors. And those things, they help us remember who the characters are and remind us of their demeanor and help us get kind of rooted back into it. Because, of course, when you're reading a novel, we're really just looking at black marks on a page. And so we have to recall that, help the reader recall that information into their mind so they can visualize it. Okay, so that's kind of some basics, but I want to talk about more than that. I want to talk about how you can take this to the next level. So sometimes I've noticed writers don't pick the most meaningful details, and they just kind of pick something, right? They might say, oh, that man wore a white shirt, and it's like, okay, but that's really generic. We might as well not even mention it because it's so generic that the reader is going to forget it almost immediately after reading it. So it's not even like a characteristic that's interesting. It's not even interesting enough to work as a tag. It's not even going to be helpful for the reader to help them remember the character. It's just very vanilla, bland, generic. So if you want to take your descriptions to the next level, what would be a good thing to do is to focus on picking details that are worth mentioning. A lot of times we tend to gravitate toward describing colors because it's the most obvious thing, but often it's the most worthless description. If you tell us the color of every single shirt every person wears, it's likely meaningless. For characters, we gravitate towards hair and eye color. And of course, for important characters like main characters, we usually do want to mention that. But, we want to go beyond that too. But we want to think about things that are unique and interesting when we're picking our details. We might want to mention some cool physical traits that stand out. Maybe there's an X-shaped scar on somebody's chin, or there's a tattooed music note on their neck, or they have a broken nose. All of those things are more individualized and more interesting and more specific. So each of those descriptions or those examples I gave, they have some kind of meaning or story behind them. They tell more than just what they are, even if we don't know exactly what that is. They're unique details. And frankly, it's the unique details that we usually notice first about people, places, items, whatever. So your viewpoint character would probably mention those things, those unique things, those unusual details. That's probably what they would notice, and that's probably what needs to be mentioned. So you want to give your readers details that deserve attention, that mean something. So, we can go back to that example, if there's a man with a white shirt. Well, what if we change that up a bit? What if we change that up a bit? And we said something like, grease stains marred his white shirt. That's a little bit better, right? It clues the reader into this character. He does something, maybe some kind of work that has grease and it's messy. We could also write something like this. His white shirt was stained from too many fast food fryers at too many fast food jobs. Now that's more interesting. It tells us something about the character and it gives him character. It's not generic. It's not as easy to forget. So you want to do the same thing with setting. We could write, Jack sat down. His desk was a tan square with 4 legs. Wow, that's really generic. Or we could write something like, Jack's desk had one leg shorter than the other, so it wobbled when he wrote. Someone had carved a lightning strike in the top that Jack's pencil often caught on. So hopefully you can hear how the desk itself now has more character and it's more interesting. You can even try to do this with summary. You could write something like, Gwen's mom and dad died in a car crash. Whoa, haven't seen that one a million times in a bunch of stories. It seems like everyone dies in books from either car crashes or from cancer. So give us an interesting detail, either an interesting new death concept or a detail that makes the car crash particularly interesting or different than what we've heard. You want to move away from the generic. Stop making all the trees in stories oaks and maples. There's lots of other different kinds of trees. And if they are oaks and maples, mention something interesting about them. That one is dying, or one has been struck by lightning, or one has a suicide note carved into it. Okay, and moving further, your details can have layers too. So a few videos ago, I mentioned that in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn books, that one character's library is described as having loads of scholarly and philosophical books, but all the spines are stiff and straight, and none of them have dog-eared pages, and each volume is dusty. So, looking at those details, right? Those details, they mean something. They go deeper than just the surface. They tell us about the character. He likes to talk and pretend to be scholarly, but he actually hasn't put in the work or research to be a scholar. The mention of this character's library, the details in the description are interesting, meaningful, and they're layered. They aren't generic and they aren't randomly thrown in. So, to take your descriptions to the next level, give us details that tell us something more, details that deserve to be mentioned and that make whatever is described, they give it more personality. Okay, in a future video, I'm going to talk about 3 methods to help make details in your writing more interesting. So, if you haven't subscribed, I hope you will subscribe. You can get my latest writing tips at septembercfox.com. I also am doing freelance editing now, so if that's something of interest to you, you can go to foxediting.com. And thanks, and happy writing!